Have you ever noticed how sometimes staying silent feels safer than trying to explain what you're feeling? Maybe it happens after a difficult conversation, or when someone asks if you're okay and you automatically say, "I'm fine," without even thinking. In that quiet moment, something inside you is watching, calculating, trying to avoid more pain. And then the questions come. Why do I shut down like this? What's wrong with me? This pattern is especially common in people with a melancholic temperament, people who feel deeply, think before they speak, and who have learned over time that silence can be a form of protection. What many people don't realize is that this silence doesn't come out of nowhere. It's far more common than it seems. It's not weakness, and it's not a lack of words. But what if, instead of a problem, it's a learned response to survive, a sign that your mind is trying to protect something important? Let's take a closer look at that. When a melancholic person goes quiet, it's not because nothing is happening. Quite the opposite. Inside, there's an entire conversation unfolding. They've already thought through every possible way to say what they feel. They've mentally tested each word, imagined how the other person might react, weighed whether the risk is worth it. It's almost like a detailed, careful internal rehearsal, one that never quite turns into speech. Meanwhile, on the outside, it looks like nothing at all, just silence. And that's when the judgments appear. You never say anything. You're so closed off. Why don't you express yourself? But the truth is, the melancholic does express themselves, just internally. They feel with clarity, organize their emotions, and process the deeper layers of what's happening. The problem isn't a lack of content, it's that translating all of that into words feels too risky. This kind of internalized emotional regulation is intense. It takes energy. And often, by the time speaking finally feels possible, the person is already exhausted by their own inner process and chooses to let it go. The melancholic silence isn't empty, it's concentrated emotional activity, and that deserves to be understood. If the melancholic already knows exactly what they feel, why don't they speak? Because over the course of life, they've learned that speaking can be costly. Maybe they opened up once and were called dramatic, or they tried to explain something important and heard, "You think too much. It's not that serious. You're too sensitive." Or maybe they said something true, but with the wrong intensity and ended up hurting someone without meaning to. And since then, they've been afraid of doing it again. Each of these experiences leaves a mark, and the mind, trying to protect itself, reaches a conclusion. It's safer not to say anything. At least that way, no one gets hurt, no one invalidates you, no one walks away because of what you feel. Silence, then, stops being just a choice. It becomes a survival strategy. Speaking is exposure, and for someone who has been misunderstood so many times, exposure feels far too dangerous. So the melancholic chooses to stay quiet, not because they don't want to connect, but because they're trying to avoid more pain. And that isn't cowardice, it's self-preservation. It's what remains when vulnerability has already been punished before. But staying silent also comes with a cost. Emotions that aren't expressed don't disappear, they stay, they build up, they take space in your chest, your throat, your shoulders, and when you least expect it, they either explode or collapse inward. Some people cry without being able to explain why. Others lose their voice before they even begin to speak. The body freezes before the mind allows expression. And on the outside, the world keeps judging. You're cold, you're dramatic, you're strange. No one sees the effort it takes to hold everything together on your own. What's worse is that over time, you start to believe those labels. You begin to think there really is something wrong with you, that you don't know how to communicate, that you're somehow inadequate. And then comes loneliness. The kind of loneliness where you're surrounded by people and still feel completely alone because no one knows what's happening inside you, and you no longer know how to put it into words. Living in silence can protect you, but it can also isolate you. And at some point, that protection turns into a prison. But there's another possibility. Not every silence needs to be fixed. Not every pause is a problem to solve. Sometimes silence is exactly what you need in that moment. And when someone understands that, when someone sits beside you without demanding words, without forcing answers, without making you feel wrong for being quiet, something shifts. The melancholic doesn't need someone to push them to speak. They need someone who makes them feel safe enough to want to speak. And that only happens when there's respect for timing, for depth, for a unique way of processing emotions. This isn't about fixing. It's about holding space, about understanding that there are different ways to express yourself, and that silence sometimes is also a language. If you recognized yourself in this silence, know this: there is nothing wrong with you. You're not strange, you're not inadequate. You simply feel in a way the world is still learning how to understand. And if this kind of reflection resonates with you, share it in the comments. We can't always find the words out there, but here it might be easier. And if these reflections speak to you, this channel is a place to stay.